SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. We are talking about a lecture course on disaster recovery and build back better. I am Shubhojyoti Samadar from Disaster Prevention Research Institute, DPRI, Kyoto University. In this lecture, we will talk about disaster risk considering three components. One is hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So we will give some small examples, illustrations with some theoretical ideas to define the very core aspect of disaster risk. Let us imagine that this is a place near Roorkee in Uttarakhand. It could be a tourist spot. People coming here watching this mystic stone in a mountain. Well, now considering this slide, is it risky? Does it look like that this could be fatal for the people? Should we consider this is as disaster or disaster risk? Now, how about that? If there is one individual is there, working there on the foothills, should we consider it more risky than the before one? Now look at the next slide. So if there is a rain, then there is a possibility that this stone would hit this person. So yes, we consider this is as risky. But if it is like that, maybe in a mountain when there is no human being and this stone falling down on a forest, do you consider it as risky, as disaster? If we have avalanches, landslides in Himalayas, do we consider these events as disasters? But maybe if it is not in a remote mountain, but people are living there, settlements are there, compared to the top one, if we consider the bottom one, to us it is more risky than the top one. Maybe we are more concerned when there are more settlements are there. If this is happening, this landslide at night time, and if this landslide is happening at daytime, we have different concerns and different way of measuring risk. So we consider that night time may be more risky because people are sleeping there. But daytime, maybe people are not sleeping at their home, but they are working outside, so they are not exposed to that kind of risk. But if this same thing is happening in an urban place, in a city area, what happens? Should we consider this is as risky, more risky? So these illustrations I am giving you just to explain that what is the meaning of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, and how these three components define risk. In our case, it is kind of disaster risk. So here are three scenarios, three pictures you can see. In the left-hand side, a landslide happened somewhere where no people are there, no settlements are there. So this is considered to be less risky. In another place, there are people, but not that densely populated settlement. We consider to be more risky or more disastrous than the previous one. In the extreme right, we have another one, which is an urban area, and disaster, landslide took place, and more casualty and losses are reported. Now, this one is considered to be risky, and with this stone can fall if we have rainfall, heavy rainfall, or if we have earthquake, then it will come and hit this place. So it has some kind of conditions, some latent conditions that may trigger some threat in future and can have different origin. It could be earthquake, it could be landslide, it could be heavy rainfall. So hazard is defined as a potentially damaging physical event, phenomena, or it could be human activity that has some latent conditions that may represent future threats and can have different origin. But also, it may cause the loss of life, of injury, property damage, social and economic disruption, and environmental degradation. So hazard, which is a potential damaging physical event and phenomena or human activity, which can cause in future, may cause some loss of life, injury, and property damage, and social and economic disruptions. And it has different origins. Like we have natural hazards, which are triggered from natural process or phenomena occurring in the biosphere that may constitute damaging event. Natural hazards can be classified according to their geological, hydrometeorological, and biological origin. Let us look here. We are talking in the origin and the phenomena. One origin is hydrometeorological hazards, and the phenomena are flood, debris, and mud flows, tropical cyclones, storm surge, wind, rain, and other severe storms, lightning. Also, we have drought, desertifications, wildland fires, temperature extremes, sandstorms, or we have more snow avalanches. So these are all considered as hydrometeorological hazards. We have also geological hazards. These are considered to be natural earth process or phenomena that include processes of endogenous origin or tectonic or exogenous origin, such as mass movement. Let us look at the phenomena of geological hazards. They are like earthquake, tsunami, volcanic activity, emissions, surface collapse, geological fault activity, mass movement, landslide, rock slides, liquefations, all are considered to be geological hazards. We have also biological hazards like outbreaks of epidemics or some kind of animal contaminations or extensive infestations. These are considered to be biological hazards. We are also not very related to here, but we can also consider some technological hazards can happen through disasters, and also some environmental degradations which can also cause disasters. In case of technological hazards, like if there is an earthquake or hitting an oil refinery, it can also cause technological hazards. Or even if we are exposed to heavy metals, hazardous materials, this should be considered as technological hazards. Similarly, we have environmental degradations. We are not going to discuss in detail of these, but just to give you a brief idea about the types of hazards in natural disasters. Here are the map that's showing the distribution of natural hazards. Let us look more maps on these. This one is the distribution of natural disasters by country and type of phenomena from 1975 to 2001. If you look into this distribution, you can see that the flood, this is one of the most reported disasters from 1975 to 2001. Go to next slide. If you look into the disaster distributions, different kind of disasters in different or hazards in different countries, the most affected people and killed are in low-income countries, and the least the high-income countries. So poorer the countries, poorer the communities, poorer the societies, they are more affected by disasters than the prosperous, developed nations and societies and communities. Okay, so low-income countries, you can see that they are affected by drought and also their flood. In case of lower middle income group countries, you can see that they are affected mostly by the flood, okay? And the other bigger contribution of human losses came from flood and also from epidemic. Now hazard, when we are talking about hazards, we have to consider a few characteristics of the hazards or features when we are talking about disaster recovery or disaster risk management. One is the frequency of the hazards. How often is the event likely to happen? Okay. And then is the duration of the hazard, the length of time that when it happened, how long it continued, and extent, the size of the area where it took place. It is in a village or in a town, what extent, what geographical area it is covering. So these are important components of hazards while dealing with disaster risk management. Now coming another feature, important feature, is the speed of onset. Like if we consider a flood, it is a flash flood, it's very sudden, without warning, very quick, or is it a kind of slow process? Like in case of cyclone, we have much time to predict, so we can prepare ourselves, we have better early warning system, and we can take time. But in case of earthquake, we don't have any time. It is very sudden. Or in case of flash flood, we have less time also considered to other kind of flood. Or so speed of onset is very important when you are considering the hazards in disaster risk management. And the spatial dispersion, area likely to be affected by particular event, okay? And temporal spacing also very important. What time, when, and it is happening. Are they random? Are they occurring in a cyclic process, in a recurring process, or they are one-time events? So these are important features when we are dealing with hazards. In case of, just for an example, maybe we can see that in case of earthquake occurs along the boundaries of the tectonic plates of the earth crust. Okay, this is one hazard. And when this is the source of the hazards, and when this happens, we can see that these plates come in contact with each other and the pressure builds up and earthquake occurs. Now this is just simply a physical event. You can see some of the distribution of the tectonic plates in some places. And this earthquake hazard, we have three physical process that can trigger this hazard. One is that convergent boundaries. Okay, when two plates collide together, this created the Himalayan mountain. So one way of the event of earthquake that can happen when two plates are colliding each other. Another is the subductions. That is when one oceanic plate goes under the land plate and created this kind of earthquake. Okay, and another one is the divergent one. When two plates are moving apart, this can also cause earthquake, and this is we call divergent reason. Now, when we are talking about hazards, can we avoid hazard? No. Historically, hazards were there, it is there, and it will remain. So we cannot avoid hazard basically. Now looking into the number of disaster from 1980s to 2005, you can look, as I told also before, it is the flood that is the most reported disastrous event. 35% of all disasters are from 1980 to 2005 are flood disasters. Another one is also a big share is the windstorm. Okay, earthquake is only 11%, and extreme temperature is 11%. So overall, 90% of disasters are related to hydrometeorological disasters. That is very important finding. Also, when we are looking into the loss of human life from 1980 to 2005, we can see that nearly 70% of loss of life are related to hydrometeorological factors. So hydrometeorological disasters are very critical, particularly when we are looking into developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Here you can see that 28% drought is the reason of human loss, 28%. Similarly, flood, 9%. Earthquake is only 14%. Here is the regional distribution of natural disasters from 1980 to 2005. You can see that Asia is one of the biggest source of disaster. It is one of the hot spots compared to any other region when we are talking about disasters. And it is the hydrometeorological, particularly the flood and drought, which play the big share of all disasters and disaster impacts. Here is also, you can see from 1991 to 2002, the growth of disasters. So actually, it is increasing in all continents, particularly in Asia. So in 1990s and 2002, you can see in Asia these disasters are actually more and more reported, and more human losses and property damage are reported. So also here is another chart. You can see from 1950 to 2005, the number of events that flood is increasing, storm also are increasing. Earthquake is almost the same as from 1950s to 2005. You cannot see much huge differences, but other disasters, you can see they are increasing very prominently. So we are talking about hazards that this landslide or this stone, when it is exposed to heavy rainfall or earthquake, it can have some potentiality to cause human injury or loss or property damage. Okay, it may cause, it not necessarily that it will cause. Now, as I said that we have avalanches and we have landslide in Himalayas. We don't care. Why we don't care if there is an avalanches, if there are landslide in Himalaya? Why? So that is important when we are talking about disaster risk management. When there is an landslide in Mumbai, a landslide in Delhi, we are concerned about. But when there is a landslide in Himalaya, we are not concerned about this. When there is an earthquake in deep sea, we are not very much concerned unless and until the tsunami is coming on the mainland. So now, if it is not a barren land or a forest, but some people are working there, okay, then do we care now? Like, it can cause that this rainfall, because of the rainfall, this landslide will take place and it may hit this person and he will be injured and property loss will be reported. Yes, we concern because this person is there and earlier he was not there. So the presence of this person is very important. So it is not only this person, but if we have more settlements, more houses, more people, we care more, right? Maybe here you look, we care more and more because the simple reason is that more and more people and settlements, houses, buildings are there, okay? So this one we are calling as exposure, the situation of people, infrastructure, housing, production capacities, and other tangible human assets located in hazard-prone areas. So, if these people, these houses are not there, we do not care about the hazard, disasters. We do not consider them as risky. We consider this landslide as risky because people, properties, buildings, infrastructures, they are exposed to that potential hazard. Okay, so how many people are exposed, who are exposed, these are important in disaster risk management. So when we are talking about the exposure, the size of the city or the settlements and where this hazard will take place is one important component of exposure. Another one is the quantity, how many people or structure or buildings are exposed to the hazard. Another one is the amount and type of activities they support. Like if they are engaged in agricultural sectors, if they are engaged in business sector or industrial sectors, they have different exposure. If they are engaged in industrial sectors, more properties are exposed to hazards than compared to in agricultural sectors. And also in a city areas where diverse occupations are there, people are also densely populated, so their property is also concentrated compared to in the villages areas. So what kind of activities, amount and type of activities are going, so these also defined that how many and what extent people are exposed to a particular hazard. It also matters that if this hazard would take place at daytime when people are not working, people are working outside, people are not at their home, or maybe nighttime when people are sleeping. So at daytime, of course, we have less people are exposed to hazards compared to nighttime. At nighttime, people are sleeping and which are very close to hazardous areas, so they are more exposed to these hazards. Compared to village areas, if it is in urban sectors, like in case of big cities, metropolitan cities, compared to a small village, yes, more and more people and properties are exposed. So when we are talking about exposure, maybe these are indicators we can define how many, what extent, who are exposed. Let's say building use, residential, commercial, industrial, they define that how many people, what extent, what type of people are exposed to disasters. Also the types of buildings, the type of constructions or building height. If they are a taller building, more people are exposed to hazards in a building age or building built up floor areas of the buildings. So, and also it depends on the occupancy details we have to take, like the population density, who are the owner of these houses and buildings. Okay, so exposed to hazards, it depends on how many people and buildings are exposed to a hazard. Now, when we are talking about hazard and exposure, so if we say that, okay, this much of people are exposed to this disaster, is it enough to define a disaster? I mean, when we say that, okay, this much of people are exposed to a landslide, a particular hazard, can we say that hazard and exposure, they will decide the degree and the type of disasters? Is it enough definition to quote that hazard multiplied by exposure will decide the magnitude of the disaster or the degree of disaster? Like, it is not only that how many people, how many buildings are exposed, but what are their characteristics, what are their features also define that what extent they are potentially at risk, right? What extent they are potentially at risk. If in a place that is prone to landslide or potentially to have a landslide like this one you can see, and maybe in this village, all people living there are old people, senior citizens, above 65 years old. So if there are only senior citizens, or maybe only children are there, okay, only kids, so of course they are more vulnerable, more exposed, and more at risk. This place we consider to be more risky. And so young people is less. So if a community is comprised by only the old people, no young people, then we consider that this community is at risk than a community which has more younger population. Or if the people who are exposed, they are only poor, they are more at risk, they are more vulnerable. And if are rich people who have better economic capacity, we consider to be that they are less risk. It also depends on what kind of houses or buildings are there. Like if we have kacha houses and mud houses, and if we have concrete houses, it also wood houses. This also define that what extent people will be impacted with these hazards. So hazard that may cause some kind of impact on human life and property does not only define the disaster. It also matters that how many people when they are exposed to that hazard. But that is not only enough. It also depends on what types of people, what are their characteristics, what are their features who are exposed to that disaster. So to define disaster. So the question is why it is so. We consider this is vulnerability. Okay, that vulnerability is one of the critical conditions to define that the degree of disasters. Now, we define vulnerability as the condition that determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or process which increase the susceptibility of a community to the impact of hazard. Okay, so which place are more vulnerable to a hazard, which geographical region, socioeconomic class, etc. Who are the vulnerable people, like which kind of households or individuals are, and what should be done, like what kind of capacity or adaptation, capacity building or adaptation measures we can, preventive measures we can take. So these also define that what extent people are at risk. So as I said that there are different conditions that define the vulnerability. We have social vulnerability like coping ability, okay, resistance or resiliency, or we could have some social environment like age or gender, ethnicity, household type. As I said that younger people are, when a society is comprising only by elder people, the society is considered to be more vulnerable than when there are younger people also. And female are considered to be, compared to be more vulnerable because they have many less socioeconomic opportunities, political opportunities, so than the male counterpart. So they are considered to be more vulnerable in a male-dominated society. It also depends on what kind of ethnicity this are exposed to disasters. When a mainstream ethnic community or majority of ethnic community, they are exposed, they are less vulnerable than a minority community or minority ethnic races. So, and also it depends on household type, joint family or nuclear family. So these all social environments that define the social vulnerability of disaster. We have to also consider the economic environment or economic factors of vulnerability. One is the income and assets, and insurance and debts. How much the person's income have, not only income but also if they have insurance, like if someone has flood insurance, so if they are affected and how they will be impacted by the flood, it depends on insurance, because if they are impacted, their livelihood would be hampered, and if they have insurance back there, that can help them to recover from that process. Also, if they have loan or debts, that also define that what extent they can absorb the shock of a particular disaster. So we have this model of disaster defining disaster vulnerability. We will talk this one later on, but this is just for as a reference. We can have also physical factors of disaster vulnerability, like the land use, and this mainly came from land use and engineering architectural perspective to define the physical vulnerability of disaster, and also like which locations the building are there, what are their conditions. So these all defined the building's vulnerability. So some people are saying that placed in harm ways or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some people may consider this is also as kind of exposure, but for some people this is also considered to be as vulnerability. And so population density levels, remoteness of the settlements, design and material used for critical infrastructures, what kind of building materials we are using. So these all define the physical factors of social vulnerability. And as we discussed also, that social factors of vulnerability are the level of well-being, the communities of societies, like education, age, gender, social status, social equality, cultural traditions, health conditions. They all define the vulnerability of the people. Also, we have economic factors like economic status of individual, community and society, and income reserves, debts, access to credits, loan, insurance. They all define the disasters. Also, we have environmental factors like the extent of natural resource depletions, the state of resource degradations, exposure to toxic and hazardous pollutants. So hazard, exposure and vulnerability, these three components are important to understand disaster risk. We will later on also discuss about disaster vulnerability in a more broader perspective, but here is a definition of disaster, that is hazard, exposure and vulnerability, that is defining the disaster. And it's a formal definition given by United Nations ISDR as disaster is a function of the risk process. It results from the combination of hazards, condition of vulnerability, and insufficient capacity or measures to reduce the potential negative consequence of risk. Okay, so a disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of community or a society, causing widespread human, material, economic, environmental losses which exceed the ability of the affected communities or society to cope using its own resources. Thank you very much.